Folks, this video has taken me a while and a half to make because even after ranting about Gran Turismo Sport Mode for well over 100 hours at this point, it's hard for me to even come to words for what's going on now. I posted on GT Planet a bit ago, basically the same thing as I just said, and the main part of this is just a culmination of all the things that I've said over those hundreds of hours is coming true. Not to really brag or anything, because I've said time and again I never really wanted the stuff that I said to stay true, but now it seems truer than ever. I've said since GT Sport closed beta that the game's physics system was not really meant for realistic racing. I've said since GT Sport closed beta that the game's ghosting system was not consistent. I've said since GT Sport closed beta that the game's penalty system was terrible. To be fair, that's probably the one that PD tried the most different thing to try and fix, but every iteration that they tried failed. And then now, something I've said more and more as time goes on, because it's one of those that as time goes on, by default, gets more and more prevalent, is people figuring out how to exploit all of the above. Exploit everything to put it to their advantage the most. Exploit the physics system, exploit the ghosting system, exploit the penalty system. Over time, people figure out how to do that more, so the problem arises more as time goes on. Now we're to the point that even in the very top split lobbies, and whatever part of sport mode it may be, daily race A, B, C, Toyota Cup, Manufacturers Cup, Nations Cup, whatever it may be, and any and all, from the very top split to the very bottom, any and everything is getting exploited to the point of it's the farthest from realistic racing that Gran Turismo has ever been, in my opinion. We're to the point now where even Polyphony Digital is trying to quote-unquote punish the very top of the top, and the way they do this seems very arbitrary. I'm not really going to get into this too much because I'm late to the party with it. If you want to do your own research, you can, but in short, Polyphony Digital has made it to where some of only the very top of the top drivers lose points for an entire round for quote-unquote dirty racing. There's been times where, yes, it makes sense that they would lose points because it was obvious dirty racing. There's been times where the vast majority of people see the clip of what happened and say that no, they shouldn't have lost points at all. But the main point that I'm going to say here is that they did it way too late. If they were going to do this, they should have done it in late 2017 when all this started. Instead, they did it 11, I think, depending on the region. 11 or 12 days, depending on the region, after the official tournaments or series, whatever you want to call it, for this year started. The ones that actually get you to the tangible events. At least 11 days later is when they said it. It's one of those things that they should probably give you about 11 days of warning in advance for, or they should have started from the very beginning, and said that if you're proven to be driving dirty, then you lose points for the race. I really don't think you need to lose points for the entire round. Maybe they could do like what happens in NASCAR a lot of times, that if you do something blatantly wrong that messes with the points, and the top of the top drivers are always competing for the main points, so really that could be involved with anything. Probably the best example, again, talk about NASCAR, is the whole thing with Joey Logano and Matt Kenseth. If you know, you know. You can do research on that from what happened a while ago. But in this case, they're all involving high points, so it's not one of those of does it actually affect the championship or not. We'll take the benefit of the doubt and say yes, it does. But the point being is that they miss the next race. That means that in terms of the splits, if you do the first split, then you still have quite a few splits left for the day. That means you're disqualified from the next split. If the driver races dirty in the very final split, then they messed up and they they don't have a chance. But that's another point too, that honestly, the very top of the tops to get their own split. Tidsney said this, and quite a few people said this throughout time, that the very top of the tops should just get their own time slot and their own split. Somewhat like the top 24 Superstars races that went to the 16 that lasted for a long time. But they don't even have to give extra points or whatever like that one round. Just do it to where in all rounds there's one specific time where it's only the best of the best racing, and then Polyphony Digital could actually steward it live, and then also theoretically the servers should be working better too. So Polyphony Digital can actually look like they do at a live event and see if people are exploiting the penalty system, the ghosting system, the physics system, all of the above, whatever it may be. That seems like a good idea to me. But yet they've still never even considered doing this. To the next point that's sort of my own point is, I made the video a while back that I still very much stand 100% sure towards, is that Polyphony Digital needs to hold dirty players accountable until they say they're going to. Gonna boycott in terms of I'm going to sell every time a dirty player needs to be held accountable. I'm not going to be nice about the game. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I'm going to boycott what they're doing by showing it happening until they fix it. But at this point, people are actually showing it happening. Do they actually fix the dirty driving itself? No, they just punish the very top of the top. To some extent, in the 0.01%, they actually meet the bare bones requirements for me to end the boycott. They actually do punish the very, again, top 0.01% if something happens. It would be better if, like I said in the initial video too, is to actually point out whether they can succeed or not. It's a different video altogether. But actually point out a solution that they could actually do to stop the dirty driving instead of just punishing it when it happens, to actually have a solution to stop it. But at this point, they did the bare bones very minimum for 0.01% of the players. They're not doing this whatsoever for anyone that aren't one of the very best in the entire world. So therefore, the 99.9% pretty much can do whatever they want with no consequences whatsoever. And this, from what I can tell, isn't really even helping the top 0.01%, because now what's going on is that people are reporting each other way more now than ever, and there seems to be reports that false reports are even getting people that, again, were falsely reported, points taken away. There seems to be more and more reports of this happening now. So now people are not just exploiting the physics system, the ghosting penalty, or the ghosting system, the penalty system. They're exploiting the reporting system for the top of the top players. From how I understand it, there's actually direct communication between some, maybe all, I don't exactly know, of the top players directly to Polyphony Digital. So I don't even know why this would be going on, but from how I understand it, it is. Some, or at least in one case, it seems like there's evidence of multiple now, people getting falsely reported of doing nothing wrong whatsoever, and then getting points taken away. The main reason it's taken me so long to make a video like this is because, one, it's reiterating most of the same stuff that I said. I've talked about the penalty system, the ghosting system, the physics system, now for 7 years. Again, back to the closed beta. The closed beta started over 7 years ago now. A lot of the same stuff is happening. In a lot of ways, it's even worse than it was over 7 years ago. And then people figure out how to exploit it more and more as time passes. With this new thing, though, I didn't even really know what to say about it. Because even before the false reporting was starting, I was lost for words, because at this point it shows that Polyphony Digital really and truly does not care about 99.9% of us And even the 0.01% that they do quote unquote care about, they don't care enough to see the exact instances to actually tell how to go about them. It's obvious they don't look at the exact instances because, again, there's the false reporting going on. And even back then, like the post I made on GT Planet and the first few days of it, it was obvious that it wasn't done in a fair way. Some people that barely did anything were getting the same penalties as people that did some absolutely atrocious things. We're to the point now that at best, Polyphony Digital acts like they care about 0.01% of the Gran Turismo player base. That's the best they're doing. It's actually been said before in interviews and such that, like, Kaz himself isn't actually taking fully into play what the players want in terms of the vehicles being added into the game or features or stuff like that, which is kind of stupid for that to actually be kind of outright said. You can go into various interviews, look on CT Planet, stuff like that. I'm not saying it in exact words because I don't really remember in exact words, especially because it's translated from Japanese anyway. But something along those that he's not really taking exactly what the fans want in terms of the gameplay and such. But in my opinion, it seems straightforward to take what the quote-unquote fans want in terms of the actual championship events because it's just common sense. It's common sense. If the best of the best are racing obviously dirty, not retaliation, not little contact here and there, not something happens with the systems that are out of their control, like it not ghosting correctly or there being way too much lag, whatever it may be. If it's obvious dirty, there's plenty of clips been shown recently and throughout time. There should be a penalty, but the game doesn't allow that to happen. If Polyphony Digital truly cared about it, they would have fixed all this at least 4 or 5 years ago, I would say at this point. You know, when everybody was locked indoors in 2020, what they should have honestly done there, because they would have had a very good excuse for it, instead of having the quote-unquote live events back then, because, well, they weren't in person, they were live in terms of showing the races live on the streaming platform, but they weren't actually live at the physical events. They should have just canceled that and fixed the stuff, even if they couldn't get it ready for GT Sport, because that was towards the end of GT Sport's lifespan. Get it ready for GT7 and just not run it in 2020. Very much valid excuse then. 2021, they probably could have used the same excuse too and gotten away with it without too much slack. And then make it really good for 2022 to be used in GT7. But no, it's too late. At this point, they just need to have a hiatus on all of the championships. This is part of what I put on GT Planet too, but I've thought about it even that much more. And again, now I've been able to make it more coherent and say more straightforward and just I'm flabbergasted and lost for words. That Polyphony Digital genuinely only acts like they care about 0.01% of us. At that point, I still can't, I'm still falling over my... That was more angry than I've been in a while. Like, to some extent, I kind of get it with the features and stuff. Oh, people say they want the newest of the new vehicles, where it takes 6 months to even render one vehicle. Plus, like, of the same model year that's being raced or whatever, the manufacturers aren't really so much for that. Yes, we shouldn't still be racing the Ferrari 458 in the Group 3 or whatever. I get that. But in a general sense, Kaz is sort of right with saying that about vehicles. With features, it's just one of those things. It's a monetary thing, is that Gran Turismo has some of, if not the biggest budget of any racing game ever, like every time. And still can't get the features figured out. I mean, it's one of those that, yeah, it could theoretically happen with features, but it would go way out of proportion in terms of budget and such. The penalty system, ghosting system, physics system, all that's a time thing. They need to put a lot of time in it. They need to put a lot of testing in it. It's not really a money thing. iRacing came out in 2009, low budget, especially back then. figured it out better in 2009 than what Gran Turismo is using 15 years later. 15 years later, the iRacing had it better in 2009 compared to 2024. A lot of other examples is about other iRacing. Put a lot of games in there. R Factor. Some people say the Forza system and ways are better. In my opinion, the track limits at times are better because it's more of a straightforward track limits. Sometimes they give absolutely stupid penalties for exceeding it. The penalties don't really match the crime whatsoever, but it's fairly more straightforward with the Forza actual track limits in terms of it's the same for more tracks and the same amount of track that you can use and such. I'm not super competitive in Forza, and again, there was a whole thing that happened to where if you know, you know. I don't really feel like getting into that, so I'm not the best to say about that. But, I mean, still, Forza, in some ways, do it better. R Factor, said, of course, iRacing 15 years ago. This is a time thing, not a money thing. Of course, they probably would have to invest some money into it for the actual testing and moving some people over towards it and away from other things, whatever it may be. I get that. But in terms of the overall money that there is for the game development in general, I'd have to assume it's quite a low percent that would be involved with something like this. There would be a lot more money going in to getting rights for vehicles, creating the vehicles themselves, creating the actual modes and stuff for the next game, whatever it may be. This is a time thing. What they need to do is they need to say straightforward, after the 2024 season, we are suspending all championship races until further notice in order for us to make the game the highest quality of experience for all of the players. They don't need to put in parentheses necessarily, but I'm going to put it in parentheses, meaning not just a 0.01%. They need to make it accessible for everyone. In my parentheses, continue to what they should say. By doing this, we plan to enhance the game's physics system, penalty system, ghosting system, and make it to where there are little to no exploits in all of the systems. And if we see any instances of this happening in the future, we will act as quickly as possible to get this fixed. Something along those lines. I'm not the best with making it sound academic and like professional and all that sort of thing, but you get what I'm saying. They just need to say straightforward and then do so until further notice. If they can't get it figured out for GT7, so be it. GT7 is nearing the grave, however you want to word it. Its best days are far behind it, even no matter how you want to put it. It's obvious we've already gotten the Spec 2 and that sort of thing. Its best days are clearly behind it. If they can't get it done for GT7, so be it. It would be nice if they did, because GTA ain't going to be on a PS4. I'm almost certainly ain't going to get a PS5. The only way I would get a PS5 is if all the Xbox stuff does happen. You can play like Forza and stuff on PS5 eventually. And then I would just sell the Xbox Series S and then put the money towards PS5, I guess. And then maybe sell the PS4 too. I would see how that would go. And go from there. But that would be the only way I'd even consider getting a PS5. So it would suck for me, more likely than not. But all in all, for the community, it needs to be on hiatus until further. Now, I'm not necessarily saying sport mode as a whole on hiatus. I mean, the way that I see it is there are so few at the top of the top doing sport mode in terms of the daily races that are weekly anyway, that it doesn't particularly matter too much with the top of the top, which is what they're regulating anyway. So whatever, I would assume more of them would do the weekly races if we knew for sure that all the championships were over, just so they would have something to do. But probably all in all, it's still best to have the weekly races go. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed for them to be on hiatus either, because again, they need to make it as best as possible. They need to put all their resources to it and possible. If it's a resource stressful thing on the company to continue, weekly races, and they know they could make a better product if they do suspend it, then they should say that straightforward and do so. But I don't think it's all that too resource intensive to run the weekly races because those have a lot less regulation, stress, like actual importance, stuff like that to them. Especially because a lot of them are just repeats anyway. And if they're repeats, you don't have to worry about the balance of performance and that sort of thing nearly as much. So, all that. But, yeah, they definitely need to end the championships, all the series, like the nations, manufacturers, Toyota. They probably shouldn't do Olympics this year, although if they were, it probably would have been announced, that sort of thing. All that. This needs to be on hiatus. It sucks. There's always been some sort of championship going pretty much every year since 2008 for a long time with GT Academy. For that, before GT Sport came out, I think they even had like a championship of kind of who they knew were good with GT6, played like a beta GT Sport and kind of did a championship. If that, and then GT Sport onward was the series. For a while it was the FIA, and then it went to the GTWS and that sort of thing. Almost every year since 2008, so it would kind of be a culture shock to the Gran Turismo community as a whole to not have some type of official championship going. But maybe they could just do a time trial thing like the old days of GT Academy. I mean, they did that with the initial Olympic event, and frankly, it was boring because it was just one time trial, one car, one track. They could have done that a lot better, as I discussed then. But I don't really think they would have to. If they don't want to do a time trial, then whatever. Because even with time trial, then they would have to put the money and all that into actually running the event themselves, and they're losing money on anything that's tangible going to the event. As I discussed before, given that it's a video game, in my opinion, they don't actually have to have it at the physical venue because it's still people seeing the same thing anyway. They're still playing the video game, rather they're playing it at their house or at the physical venue. In my opinion, it would be much better if they just pay the people half of what the expenses would cost to actually run it to the individuals, and then there would also be a lot less money in use than what doesn't go to the individuals, like paying the staff who go to the venture, getting the actual technology set up there, like the wheels and the screens and all that, the electric cost, all that. I would say most people would rather get half of what the actual their experience would cost and the experience themselves, because then they could use half the money to whatever. And then also there would be so much more there. It doesn't necessarily have to be happy, you get what I'm saying? The players should get paid. I've discussed that, and that's been a whole debacle thing too. But the point being is that it doesn't necessarily have to be live. But I get it if it's resource intensive to have a live event. If it's just time trial, it seems kind of redundant. I get that. It doesn't necessarily have to be time trial, but whatever. I'm not opposed to this GT Academy coming back, and then it is time trials, and then if they can get with TV network or streaming service or whatever driving the physical cars, that would be amazing, especially because it seems like a Gran Turismo movie internationally is quite successful. In the US, maybe not so much, but GT Academy International, like maybe don't even make it one country to one country, just make a whole international thing. Have that come back. Has said that he's not as interested in that. I genuinely don't know why. That's stupid to me, but whatever. Maybe they could do that, and then again start with time trials. But again, they don't have to do the time trials if they're resource intensive. The main thing needs to be having this go on hiatus and fixing it. There's no way that a hiatus and focusing the full efforts into doing this would hurt anything. It would be no guarantee that it would be up to people's standards and such, would be better than what it is now, and at least it would show that Polyphony Digital is putting in effort. Whether the effort succeeds as much as it should is one thing, a whole different video we'd see as it goes, but they need to show that they're going to put in that effort. At this point, they need to just have a hiatus on the events and put in as much effort as they can to fix the physics system, the ghosting system, the penalty system, and make sure any combination of those can no longer be exploited. They need to make it accessible to everyone and not just acting like they care about the 0.01%. If they do that, it might be worth the e-haul, but do I expect them to do that? No, I don't expect them to do that. Hopes versus expectations I've discussed since even before GT7 was released. I don't expect them to do this in the slightest. They very much should do this, But I get why this would be a controversial thing because, again, they've had very few and far time in between and without a championship between since even 2008. So I get that this might be a controversial opinion, but that's my opinion. I'm definitely going to stick to it. Because overall, in the long term, I think it would be a massive advantage to show that Polyphony Digital is at least trying. It would be incredible if they succeed, but at the very least, they need to show that they're going to try. And as of now, all they're doing is acting like they care about the 0.01%. As of now, it's further than EHA than it's ever been in so many ways. And do I realistically think it's going to get better? No. But it would be so much of the EHA if they at least act like they're going to try.